Padres are making some moves. Good to see. Kicking up dust in Peoria. Spring training has begun, and there is a new arm or two in the rotation. So big news for the Padres, and good to see some baseball back. And we got one of our favorites to discuss it. Boots on the ground. Sammy Levitt in Peoria. Kind enough to join us amidst what is always a busy schedule in these spring training days. So excited to hear from him and hear what the word is there in the Peoria Sports Complex around the Padres. No Derek with us this afternoon. He is out at the Genesis Invitational on a rainy gray day at Torrey Pines. So covering the tournament for the TV side of things. So should catch up with Derek next week, who will be in Peoria at that point. So we'll have some spring training coverage for you as well. No time to waste. Appreciate OG's, the sponsor of the On Friar podcast. Thanks for all they do for us on the pod and the TV side as well. If you got a big game you want to watch, place to hang out, have a good meal, OG's is the place to do it. Check in on one of their many locations around San Diego County. They're constantly updating their menu, lots of specials, great beer list. So hit up OG's. And again, sincere thank you to OG's for all they do for the On Friar podcast. Without further ado, the walk-up music. And with that, this episode of the On Friar podcast begins, and we are joined by the legend himself, Sammy Levitt. Hey, TikTok's still alive, Sammy. I didn't think we were going to make it this far.
I know we had a scare there for a little bit, but yes, at least for now, everything with TikTok is good, and everything's good here in Peoria. So things are looking up for your old friend Sam.
Appreciate you being with us. As always great to have you on and pick your brain. And, with the team all together and some assembly of you media folks out there in Peoria, I wanted to get somebody who's actually in the action. You were the first that came to mind. I was like we got to have Sammy on. We got to have Sammy get his thoughts on what's going on so far. We'll get to Pavetta and all that, like general, and it's early. First, pitchers and catchers was Wednesday, first full squad on Monday. So a lot yet to happen. We were just discussing, haven't heard from the Mannies and Tatises and Bogarts of the world just yet. That will come. But what's just kind of been the general vibe, mood of the club so far in these early days?
Yeah, it's been a pretty, I would say, normal first couple of days of spring training. As far as baseball work, I mean, it's been the pretty typical work on the field, live bullpens, bullpen sessions, stretching, live BPs, defensive drills. There are a number of position players that are already here. Jake Cronenworth, Jackson Merrill, Xander Bogaerts are all here amongst some other guys as well. And I always say with the disclaimer that you never see everybody. Like, for all I know, there's somebody that's in the building the last couple of days that hasn't been out on the field, but those are the guys that have been out there and were taking part in live BPs today. But I would say, for the most part, pretty normal first couple of days of spring. Everybody in a pretty good mood, good vibes. Certainly there's a level of familiarity with Mike Shildt, and I think that's a little bit different, where last year, it was his first spring training. You're trying to set the tone. I think all of us are trying to get a sense of who Mike Shildt is, his managerial style, the messaging that he would bring into spring training. So it's been a pretty typical, first couple of days. A lot of new faces, which is true every spring. I think maybe it's a little bit more true this spring, because even with the recent flurry of activity, there's still a lot of question marks, and there's going to be a lot of open competition on this team, even with the recent activity. So you get that sense, a lot of new faces, a lot of names that could play a role this spring training, could make this team, inside that clubhouse. So, but aside from that, it's been pretty typical, pretty on par with what the last couple of years of being out here day one have been. But that's a good thing. I mean, I always say it to people, if you're a baseball fan, if you're a Padres fan, you will absolutely eat up, what goes on in Peoria from a baseball standpoint. It's great stuff. It's great to see them working. You see matchups on the backfield that you would just never see. Like I'll give you an example today. Francis Pena and Omar Cruz, who are, as Pena in particular, who are pretty, well-established prospects in the Padres system. Like today, they were going up against Bogarts, Cronenworth, and Merrill, right? So you've got Pena, who they're really high on and seems like has a real chance to be a major leaguer one day. And you've got him on a backfield on a random Thursday going up against these major league hitters as they get ready for the season and get their timing down and all of that. So again, it's just an example. You don't see this stuff during the season. So it's pretty unique and a good opportunity for people, myself and fans alike, to go out and see it.
Monday, a funny day because Mike Schilt, peppered with questions about the rotation. There's obviously uncertainty about kind of Dylan Cease's future, but more so like, okay, if that's your big thing, Cease, King, Darvish, how do you fill out the last two spots? You hear about Stephen Kolek getting stretched out as a starter and him kind of joining that mix in the competition. And then somewhere around like 6:00 last night, a passing bomb, Nick Pivetta to the Padres, which caught all of us, I think, a bit off guard. I think one of the reactions was, hey, the Padres have money to spend. That's a good sign. We weren't so sure about that. And if, an acquisition like that would have to come because of a complementary move, a trade of some sort. And so I think that was encouraging. But then it completely alters sort of the calculus as far as that rotation goes. Also kind of a classic AJ Preller move. I mean, I was there a couple years ago when Michael Wacha showed up.
Yeah.
Dylan Cease right before the Soul Series last year. So this very much an AJ Preller type of move. I know it wasn't official yet. I think still not yet official from the club. And so there's only so much AJ and Mike Schilt can say. I think Schilt said, well, you see the smile on my face. What did you hear or glean from those conversations about the addition of Pavetta as well as Kyle Hart and what they could mean to this club?
Yeah, I think number one, you're right. AJ Preller did speak today, and he didn't get into Pavetta in particular because of the deal not officially being done, which is pretty standard operating procedure for any organization, that they're not going to comment on it until the deal is official, which I get. But you alluded to what Mike Schilt said. Look, I think before getting into sort of the larger picture of it, just in a baseball sense, I mean, I really like it. Look, you're going to look at Nick Pivetta's ERA the last handful of years. It's not going to knock your socks off, but I think there's real reason for upside with him. If you listen to some of the things that have been said about him, if you read some of the different adjustments he's made, the strikeout rate, the lack of walks, to me, it screams of a guy, and it's a little bit different because of the contract. But you think about it, and you said Michael Wacha, like, I don't think that's a terrible comparison, because it does fall in the category of somebody who's a very established veteran major league pitcher that you bring in on remember Michael Wacha's contract, again, different, but creative, bring in on a creative deal. And I think you're betting a little bit on the upside. And I think you're betting on working with Ruben Niebla. And look, I think just from a baseball standpoint, as of yesterday morning, we showed up here and they had 2 open rotation spots. And it's not a disrespect to Matt Waldron, Randy Vasquez, Johnny Brito, Stephen Kolek, all the guys who are now competing for presumably 1 spot. But look, that's a huge question mark as a whole, to have 2 open rotation spots and really not know who's filling them, what you're getting from those 2 spots. So I just love it from the sense of you got a real veteran professional pitcher who can eat up innings, is a competitor, hopefully has upside. And I like that. It's the kind of move a good team, pursues and does when they need back end of the rotation help. And then obviously there's the bigger picture of it, which is the fact, that the deal is really creative, reportedly, right? The $3 million signing bonus, $1 million salary helps them cash-wise for the payroll for this year. And then the idea that, hey, the AAV is still $13+ million, and now they're firmly above the luxury tax threshold. And you do wonder, okay, well, all the reporting has been that they probably want to stay under, but that would mean you would have to make a significant move or two to get under that by opening day. It would seem a little potentially odd to me to make the trade and then have to absolutely now trade something, because it, to me, kind of ruins your trade leverage and puts you in a weird position. I mean, we're a month and a half away from opening day. It's a little out of order, I would say, in my opinion, if they were going to do that. And then you see the reporting by Kevin Acee, by Dennis Lin, basically saying maybe they're comfortable being over that CBT number for this year. And it kind of gets you thinking, like, okay, maybe this is just going to end up a little bit different in a good way than what people initially anticipated. So look, AJ Preller didn't say anything today that would lead you to believe that they're absolutely going to trade Dylan Cease or Michael King or Robert Suarez or something like that. Again, he didn't get into specifics, but he talked a little bit about the reporting and maybe the accuracy of some of that stuff. I can't recall exactly what he said verbatim, but I certainly didn't come away from his press conference today. And again, it is AJ Preller, and look, he's never going to reveal all that much, which is
much of anything at all.
He's allowed to do that. But I certainly didn't come away from that feeling like, oh, here comes the other move. I mean, they're going to have to get rid of somebody. And to me, if you're going to sign Pavetta to that kind of deal for that AAV, it's just my opinion, it wouldn't necessarily make sense to me if you were doing that and then planning to create another hole, ruin, I guess, some of your trade leverage. If everybody knows you got to trade, if you're talking about trading Dylan Cease now, all the other teams know, well, they got to get rid of him now. Like, I don't know. I sort of lean, just based on what's happened and what AJ said or didn't say today, I sort of lean into what some of the reporting has been now, which is maybe they are going to be above that number, which is great. I mean, I think we were all very surprised by it yesterday, but I'm really happy about it because, to me, it is a foot on the gas pedal type of move. And I do believe this team as a core, good enough, if they can make it work financially, to do that. And you look at their rotation now, and hey, if you can get, some sort of mix of Matt Waldron, Randy Vasquez, and look, it's baseball. We know how this works. There are going to be guys that, unfortunately, there are injuries typically at some point in some capacity. Like we know, you're probably going to see Matt Waldron, you're probably going to see Randy Vasquez, and maybe some others at some point during the year. But if just from the number 5 spot, like if you can get really nice production out of that, or at least good enough, that's a very, very solid rotation now with Pavetta included. You feel way better about the rotation. So long answer, as always with me, but I like it from a baseball standpoint. I like the creative accounting part of it. And unless there's another move that's looming, which there could be, doesn't appear that's a guarantee right now based on what I can tell. So, unless there's another move looming, I think it really fortifies this rotation, and you have a top 4 that could be really, really formidable.
I agree. A couple things and AC's reporting yesterday specifically said that the belief is that the ownership is more concerned with cash payroll than AAV. And so that makes perfect sense with this deal. You mentioned the AAV of the Pavetta deal as reported, but that they would just be paying him $4 million this year. I think that's encouraging to a lot of people. We're trying to keep this year's number as reasonable as possible, but that doesn't mean we're not afraid to dip our toes into the CBT.
Right.
Especially given where they are right now. Like you said, it would take a lot of maneuvering to get now back below that line. You've got Hosmer's 12 plus coming off, potentially Cease, potentially Arise, potentially Suarez. That's a good amount of money. Now, if you look at the Tatis deal, I think maybe Machado, you see that number escalating pretty quickly and pretty dramatically. So that's something to factor in as well. But I think that was encouraging for a lot of people. Now when you consider like different maneuvers, and I mean, you probably could have caught me at some point in the last few weeks where I was just like, you know what? Keep Tatis, keep Merrill, keep Machado, sell everybody else, start from scratch. Like there's probably a point in time in the last couple months where I'm like, that might be the way to go. After that trade yesterday, I'm like, you know what? Just roll the dice. Roll the dice on 2025. As I think John Morosi told us a couple weeks ago, have Cease. It was at the point before the King deal. Have King, have Arise on your roster to start the season. You know you can get value for them at the trade deadline if things go terribly south. And obviously, you're a better team with those guys around. And maybe it's worth just rolling the dice in 2025, being as talented, as good as possible, knowing that some of these guys might walk, but look, you're going to get some financial flexibility on the other end of it. And this is coming from somebody that's like, man, they kind of blew it not getting something back from Blake Snell and not getting something back from Josh Hader. I think, and part of it is fan service as well. Like fans want to believe that the window is still open, a championship window, a chance to really contend is still available. And that at least gives them that belief and that hope in this team rather than trading off Cease and trading off other guys. All that being said, I could certainly understand now a deal for Robert Suarez. And with bringing in Kyle Hart as well as Nick Pivetta, I love Matt Waldron. I really like the potential of Randy Vasquez and Johnny Brito, but maybe there's a package there that it is Suarez as a rental, but one of these younger, less established, but promising guys. I don't know what their team controls for all of them, but I would guess, a couple years or so, that could probably get you something back, a useful piece or two back. And so that it'll be interesting to see. Part of me did think, okay, maybe Cease could be a complimentary move. But now I think, okay, especially after the Hart move, there's a lot of guys competing for one spot. I don't think you miss the playoffs because Matt Waldron, Johnny Brito, or Randy Vasquez aren't around. They've had cost-effective closers before. Like, I think the potential is there to swing an interesting move.
Yeah, look, a couple of thoughts on everything he said. Number one, it was my contention even before yesterday, the Pavetta move and then the Kyle Hart move today. And look, Hart was very, very excellent in the KBO. How does that translate to Major League Baseball this year? I don't know. But again, it's another low risk move because you're not paying them very much. And I would assume, and he talked a little bit about this today, that they see something in him, and he works with Ruben Niebla. You think there's upside there, then fine. I mean, it's a very low risk move, so that's totally fine. And he's a lefty for whatever it's worth. You have a very righty heavy starting rotation, and even the options for the fifth spot are all righties. So that might have been a little part of it to get a lefty in there. But even before the news of yesterday, and I don't say this really even though this is not reality, but even considering the financial part of it, my opinion was, if you're asking me, I just kind of want to roll with this team and see where you are come the summertime. And you can always, if you are out of it or if you're teetering, on the brink of being out of it, you can always address it around the deadline and move a Cease and move a King. But I think your competitive window, as you said, and your core of guys, they're still plenty good enough where even though you don't have a perfect roster, I don't know, I'd like to see them at least try and roll with it, and you see where you are come the summertime. That was my thought on it. So that was number one on that. And I can't remember now in my head what the second part of my point was. But look, I think again, just on the Pavetta part of it, it fortifies things. I'm blanking on what the
he's
second
also
part of my because I had a good second point. So this is what happens when I'm long days in Peoria, but
I think, and maybe this will trigger something. I think the Pavetta move also is somewhat classic AJ, not just in the timing of it, but like Michael Wacha, it'd been around for a little while, had some struggles, but he seemed to find something right before he came to the Padres. Like Joe Musgrove was coming into his own as a starter right before he came to the Padres. Yu Darvish was obviously like Yu Darvish, but then had like a year or two where he was scuffling a little bit, like found something again. Then he came to the Padres. Michael King, the end of his 2023 season came to the Padres. Seth Lugo. So they've had these guys that are like on the precipice of something, and they bring them here. They bet on them, give them the opportunity, get them with Ruben Niebla. And I think like Pavetta, just like a guy with really great stuff, susceptible to the long ball. Like it just seems like a perfect opportunity for this to be like another Ruben Niebla / AJ Preller masterclass.
Yeah, I remembered the second part of we were talking about Robert Suarez. And so what I meant to lead into from I would just kind of like to roll with this group and assess things in the summer was, if I was going to trade one of them, to me it would be Suarez, because, and again, I'm not even talking about the financial part of it. Yes, Dylan Cease and Luis Suarez, like guys that are in walk years, you're going to move more money by trading them, okay? But just from a baseball standpoint, I still think the reason, if you're going to move anybody, the reason Suarez made sense was because you have a really deep pen. Like, there are a lot of guys down there. I mean, you look in that clubhouse, Estrada, Morejon, Adam, and then you have the young crop of guys, Alec Jacob, Sean Reynolds, who, I mean, you watch that guy throw on the backfield, and we've seen him now. I think he's going to be pretty darn good when given the opportunity, like closer type stuff and potential one day, even if that's not right now. Ron Marinaccio, like it's a deep pen, and I haven't got to everybody. I mean, there are legitimate, Mike Schultz talked about it a little bit today. I mean, there are a legitimate, for a bullpen that's only going to be 8 guys. How many did I just name right there? Like, that's 6, 7 right there of names that are I think, certainly going to be in it. So, I mean, there are 10 plus guys that I think are legitimate in battling for spots in that bullpen, more than 10 in all likelihood. And we could go down the roster. I won't, but that's the one area where I'd almost feel comfortable with it, because I think you can get by without Robert. Now, if you have Robert, makes your bullpen even that much better. So, I would say this, though, if you're telling me that they don't have to move money, okay, well, then maybe I keep Suarez. But to your point, Darnay, you were saying, yeah, look, you would love to get another starter. And maybe that's a way to get one, is to move a Suarez and somebody else in a package, or somebody's else, multiple people, and you get let's say a solid, youngish, controllable starter back. Maybe. Does that deal exist? I don't know. But I think we got reminded a little bit yesterday that AJ Preller typically works very late in the calendar as far as the off season, and gets very creative. And you never know with this team what direction they're going to go in, and they tend to surprise you. So anyway, that goes back to what I was saying. It was about Suarez, and that would be the guy I'd move if I'd move anybody. But if you don't, then maybe they don't, because they don't have to clear the payroll like we initially thought.
Yeah. You spoke with Kyle Hart. What did you take away from that interaction?
Yeah, extremely well spoken. Seems very thankful of the opportunity. Obviously, was mostly in the minor leagues before he went to Korea. Struggled, for the most part in the majors. When you just look at the numbers, in the KBO, made some adjustments, dropped his arm slot down. Clearly, I think what's interesting about Hart, based on what he said today, yes, did he take a step down as far as level of competition in the KBO? He did, but he also clearly made adjustments. And he also talked about sort of the pitch that Ruben Niebla and the Padres made to him. It did sound like there was at least some sort of communication about what they saw in him. And to me, it's not only somebody who's made adjustments and now had success, but it seems like somebody that they're really going to work with and clearly see upside in. Now, does that mean that, that Kyle Hart's going to make this rotation? Not necessarily. I mean, we'll see, right? Again, low risk. He's not making very much money, so he's certainly not a lock. But you like that he's from the left side. You like there have been significant adjustments, it seems, since the last time he was in the major league. So again, high up, I'm I don't know if you want to even say high upside because we don't really know what he is yet, but certainly it seems like they see some upside in him and he sees some room for growth and has made some pretty significant adjustments. So we'll see, but very well spoken, very happy to be there. Seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders, and now we see what a second tour in the major leagues might look like for Kyle Hart.
A couple things I want to get to these last few minutes. We'll start with Luis Campusano. One of the areas where you can consider them, possibly adding is the catcher spot. Mike Schill talked about, they believe in Luis. They felt good about what he did last year. He talked about his record as the Padres catcher. I did go back and look at it. Their win-loss record in games he started was better than their win-loss record in games that Kyle Higashioka started. I'm not making a statement about the quality of those two catchers. I'm just simply stating the facts because Mike Schultz said that's part of how they evaluate him. What I thought was interesting was AJ Preller talking about Campy today and how it takes time with the catcher. It's a tough position. It's demanding. Now you got the pitch clock and all these different factors. And you don't necessarily see like 22, 23-year-old guys pop like it's 26, 27 later in their career. And I couldn't help but hear that and think about Ethan Salas. And what does this mean for Ethan Salas? Does that outlook apply to Ethan Salas as well? A guy who I think some people would say they've rushed through the system a little bit and had to slow things down last year. And I think there's so much speculation from the outside. When would he arrive? Now, I think there's certain talents, like look at Jackson Merrill last year. They probably broke some rules with how they moved Jackson Merrill along last year, and it worked out marvelously. And I don't think there's any looking back. So it doesn't apply to everybody. But I was hearing him talk about Campy, and I think it's very fair what he said. And I think there's a portion of the fan base that's like, okay, we tried. It's time to move on. It might not necessarily be fair. But when you have Salas coming along, how does that apply to that? But I think, more immediately, like, where do you think they actually stand on the catcher position? And is this lip service about Campy, or do you really believe like he's our guy? We're going to ride with him, give another opportunity this year.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think it's a difficult question to answer. I'll get to the Salas part of it in a second. With Campy, you just look at the names in there right now. I do believe he has a great shot to make this team. Now, I think it's pretty clear that Elias Diaz will be the lead guy, but it's a catcher in 2025. And the reality is, he's not going to catch every day. So whoever the backup is going to get, at the start of the year, some significant playing time. I do think Campy's going to get a real chance to win that job. I don't know that that's for certain. It's an interesting case because, if you take AJ Preller at his word from earlier today, it sounds like they very much still believe that there's more left in Campy. And look, I do too, just based on what we saw at the end of 23. Like, I think a lot of us, maybe you included, Darnay, were very high on Luis Campusano coming into last year because it seemed like there were some improvements defensively at the end of 23. Offensively, I thought he was really impressive the last couple of months of 2023. And then it just didn't happen last year. And, offensively didn't work out great. Defensively didn't work out great. So that's kind of where he stands is, he's now been around a while. It's been a very roller coaster experience. I think he's got a real chance to make this team. But he's got guys pushing him, Martin Maldonado is there. And, I would imagine they signed him with the idea of let's get him in camp and see what he looks like. And could you see a scenario where Campy's at AAA to start the year and they say, you know what, we're going to give Maldonado a chance to be a backup. And, we know he's a veteran type and let's see how it goes at least early on. And if it's not working out, if he's, not what he once was defensively and he's not hitting, like we'll just part ways at some point and Campy's always an option to go to. It could be. I put it this way. I don't get the sense that they're like done with Luis Campusano. That's not the sense I get at all. So I think he will have a real opportunity to make this team. And I think he very well could be one of the two catchers out of camp because, even though there are some options there, Maldonado. I mean, Brett Sullivan. I love Brett Sullivan. He's great clubhouse guy. He's had some moments when he's had opportunities in the major leagues. I don't know if Sully has a great spring training. Could he push his way on to being the backup? Maybe. He's a good defender. I mean, I wouldn't put anything out of the realm of possibility. But the point is, unless you're dipping all the way down to Salas, there's not like a name that's like right there pushing Campusano out of the picture per se in a really, really strong way. So my read on it is that Campy's got a real shot to make this team. I think they still believe there is, untapped potential in there, even though he's been around a while. We've done this, now a handful of times. And I hope he does, because, there was a portion of 2023 where I was like, man, this guy can really hit. I mean, defensively, I know, there's always been questions, but, where I felt like he can really hit and has a good approach. And look, I know he did a little bit of this last year, but even during BP the last couple of days, he's adjusted. I have to look at it a little bit closer to see like what he's done.
Like in like the winter highlights, he seemed like he had a more standard stance.
And late last year, he was kind of closing it up still. So I've got to look at it closer and compare it, because I was looking at it today and it's hard from the side. And I'm battling with people with high school players that were there that were watching for my video spots. Anyway, so I've got to look at it a little bit closer. I didn't quite get there today to really like break it down and look at some video of him, but it does look a little different. So he's clearly adjusting, whether that's going to really, be a major factor or not. So again, to sum that up, I think he's got a real shot to make the team. I don't think he's been cast off to the side. And I also think it's a function of, I'll get to Salas in a second, but I think it's a function of there's not like a clear name that's going to push him out of the picture unless they just come here and they're unbelievable. So we'll see. So I think it's I got asked about it on the radio yesterday. And it's a really good question and that's why I asked AJ about it today. Like, it's an interesting situation with Campusano, and
very,
So with Salas, it's amazing. Every time he shows up to spring training, he looks bigger, which makes sense because he's still only 18. So he's probably growing. I know last year he definitely grew. He looks bigger to me again. So I haven't spoke to him yet. So I don't know if he's had a growth spurt, or I'm just imagining things, or I don't remember. Look, obviously now he's been around quite a bit as far as the last couple of years. Look, they were very aggressive early on with him. Last year there was a very, very long stretch, as where offensively it was a struggle. And by the way, I'm saying this all with, the context of this is a very young player. I'm not saying this as like,
it's not a criticism.
Oh my goodness, I'm panicked. It's the end of the world with Ethan Salas. I mean, he's a teenager, so he struggled. I mean, like this idea that it was just going to be all roses, I mean, that probably was unrealistic. So I'm not panicked at all over the fact that he went through some struggles. Maybe it'll ultimately be a good thing that he went through some early struggles in the minor leagues, and the first time that he struggles is in the major leagues. On one hand, I would say it would seem crazy, if Ethan Salas has a great spring, it would seem crazy that somehow he could work his way onto the roster, or at some point early this season is in the major leagues. It would seem out of the realm of possibilities. But to your point, Darnay, Jackson Merrill is the comp of none of us thought in January of last year that Jackson Merrill was going to be the team's starting center fielder on opening day, let alone be on the roster on opening day. So you never know. I mean, I think the Merrill comparison's a little different because Merrill had already spent a bunch of time at high A, hadn't spent very much time at double A, but was a little older, a little farther along, just as amount of playing time in the minors, even though it wasn't a ton at double A. I'd still be very surprised, but let's see. I mean, look, it does feel like, I would say, and again, I say it all with like a little grain of salt because he's so young. It does feel like a little bit of a bigger year for Salas, maybe, because he did struggle for such a portion of last year. starting to get at least a little bit older, getting more experience. It'll be interesting this year, just in the minors, to see, does the bat really start to percolate in a consistent way. So, to me, in my head, it's still Ethan Salas is this prospect who they've got a major league camp. I put him in the category of DeVries. Like, these two guys who are really young, they're teenagers, they're here to get experience, to get some tastes of the Cactus League games when they get in there. At some point, they'll be sent to minor league camp, and we'll see how they do this year. But to your point with Padres, if he comes in and he's awesome this spring, who the heck knows, right? I wouldn't put anything past him.
I promise you 30 minutes, and we've already blown past that. So last thing, you be as concise or verbose as you please.
I'm not typically concise, so I bet it'll be a long answer.
But I believe it was you who asked about ask AJ if they're still looking to add, from a position player standpoint, add another bat. And AJ, who is a master at providing both options without answering the question, like, yeah, no, we got some great internal qualities. We feel good about the guys that we have. At the same time, we're always exploring the market and open to possibilities. So you're like, okay, there's nothing there. But I think you asked the question and he immediately said, oh yeah, we're definitely looking. Like, wait, we want to add. And I was like, all right, sweet. Now we'll wait for another, if it's a Nick Pivetta type, but as a bat, or another Connor Joe, Jason Hayward type. I was excited to hear AJ Preller plant his flag as, yes, we will add to our position player pool at some point.
Yeah. And it would seem that way, right? That they would need.
It makes sense, certainly.
At least another small signing or two of guys, because look, even after the Hayward and Joe signings, I mean, you're looking at, all respect to those guys, like more quadruple A type players to make up the rest of this bench and the rest of this 26-man roster. So I'd be surprised if there's not at least like another minor move or two, major league signings, but at least, well, I don't know about that. Maybe there will be minor league deals, more like the Gavin Sheets deal, right? Who probably has a very good chance to make the team.
He also said something interesting, if I can interject. Basically saying what I think we've all thought, and which happened last year with Solano and Peralta. He admitted we need guys to surprise us, and that he feels like Connor Joe and Jason Hayward are guys that can surprise them. So maybe it'll be interesting to see if, like you're saying, is it a minor league type guy, another person they hope that can surprise them, or is it like an established real big leaguer that we're all familiar with that could step in and fill a slot?
Yeah, and I, in sort of a similar area of question, I asked Mike Schilt a little bit after that with AJ today about, and I asked AJ a similar question as well about the right side of the infield in conjunction with the DH spot, right? Like how he views Cronenworth, Arise, but the fact that they don't have on this roster right now a bona fide DH. I mean, opening day, who's the DH? I don't know right now. Lefty Max Fried on the mound. I assume Connor Joe would be in left field. I don't know. Is Hayward going to be your DH? I wouldn't think so. Lefty on lefty. So I'm literally thinking about it. Like if Arise is at first, who's your DH on opening day? That's an unclear answer. So the answer for Mike Schilt today, and again, this kind of ties into, I would imagine there's got to be some other names that show up here at some point. But he talked about, at least right now, that spot being, maybe interchangeable, where it's, hey, Manny's the DH one day, and it might be a type of thing where, it's a different guy every day, and they're mixing and matching and giving guys days off. Maybe, look, it seems to me like Manny likes to play third base every day. Like Xander would probably want to play shortstop every day. Your infield's kind of set, right? I guess Arise certainly could be a DH on at least some days. But to your point, no matter what their answers were today, it still seems like a real a question mark. So to tie it back into like, do you think there are going to be other moves? It would seem to me that there have to be at least a couple of other minor things that happen here. And by the way, maybe those, again, we talk about the next move. Maybe that's a trade that we just don't see coming. I mean, again, I think we learned with the Pavetta signing, they surprise you. And, you didn't see the Cease and Arise trades coming, even though they had been linked to those guys before.
Sure.
You didn't see them at the
Especially
time.
timing. Yeah.
So we'll see. But to me, the rounding out this lineup, I do think is a question, because right now, when Arise is at first base, I don't know who that DH is right now. So seems pretty significant, and seems like we still have some pieces to the puzzle to figure out before opening day. But yeah, I would think there's going to be some other moves.
Sammy, you're the best. Anything we should look out for? Any regular appearances on Ben and Woods or the Padres? Your evening show. How often are you doing that now?
Yeah, we'll do it during the rest of spring, and then it'll be done when the season starts. But Ben and Woods every morning. It's not a standard time because it depends what's going on. But Ben and Woods every morning. And then I do Annie and Elston Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I'm sure I'll jump on the afternoon show at different points as well. And the biggest thing during spring training, probably even beyond the radio appearances, is just the social media. I will say without doubt that we do a really good job on social media, on the 97.3 The Fan X account, on Instagram, Facebook, all these different platforms, of giving you a taste of spring training. A lot of video, both major players like the Mannies, and I'm on the backfields. Yeah. TikTok, right? Yeah. We're all over the place. So make sure you follow me at Sammy Lev, SAMMYLEV on the social media platforms, and 97.3 The Fan as well, because I'm out there taking videos. I had a scout joke with me today that I have more video than the Padres have, because I'm out there so much taking videos. So it gets noticed. So make sure you follow us on social media.
Your goodbye to TikTok video is over 66 million views.
Yes.
Good gracious.
Yeah. My goodbye TikTok video was only a 13-hour goodbye. So,
well, and then
you know me, I milked it for everything it was worth.
The 2024 season ender, 97.3 million. Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. Appreciate you, Sammy. Can we get you to say the line?
And with that, this edition of On Friar, sponsored by OGs, has come to an end. Bye, everybody.